hours it took me to make that. I don't know why, because it's fairly pointless. If you listen on the podcast, you won't have a clue. But welcome to 4020 Live. We're back live in the studio. I say we. Downstairs. But they will be here shortly to talk all the world of rugby league news. Now, the number one rugby podcast in Turkey. Not just, rugby league, all rugby. So the other one, rugby sevens, wheelchair rugby, rugby on darts, I don't know. Hi Paul, he's watching. They're coming up the stairs now. I'm talking to the audience. They're ready. There were 7 people waiting with bated breath to talk rugby. We don't kick off late like a Super League game.
We never kick off on time.
That's the problem these days, isn't it? How are we all?
Excellent, thank you. How are you?
Okay, I think. We need to check. Does everyone have proper degrees? Because otherwise, I don't know if we're qualified to talk about rugby league.
I don't have a degree in rugby league. I do have a degree.
I've got a Mickey Mouse one, so I'm officially.
Well, there'll be no more of that.
Well, no. I mean, combined studies (brackets media pathway).
Combined with what, though?
Journalism. Yes, believe it or not, I did 2 units of journalism.
But the big news
Is
we're number one in Turkey.
I've just mentioned that. Yeah, we're number one in Turkey. It's genuine.
So to all the Turks watching,
I don't know what the hello is in Turkish. I don't make this up. We genuinely get these. I get an email every week that tells us where we are in the charts across the world, and I've never seen Turkey appear before. But usually we're somewhere in the 20s or 30s in Britain. We're 25 in Britain. In Canada, 96. Things to do in Canada.
never got back after that demise.
No, so we blame them for that. Who do we blame for that? 82 in Australia. Well, there's lots of rugby podcasts in Australia, so that's fair enough. 11th in Spain. 55 in New Zealand, 30 in Switzerland, which, as we know, is just Carsten. And 56 in the USA. Now, we are not just number one in Turkey, but we're on the sports podcast in Turkey, so we're up against all the other sports, which is football.
Handball.
98th in Turkey in all of sport. Now, you don't, you know.
Well, hello, Turkey.
Has somebody gone on holiday to Turkey and downloaded the podcast?
That's all I can assume, because there's no other reason why. Is Rugby League being in Turkey? Were they in our draw last? Oh, they were in our draw, yeah.
It's not big.
They're
in.
Didn't they hold the Euro D, was it?
Yeah, no, beach tournaments out.
We had the Turkish people on the line because it worked when we did the draw last year, which was an amazing success, which we haven't been asked back to do again. Why is that?
Haven't been any rugby league. International Rugby League. But word on the street, whichever street that happens to be, is that the meeting of the ICC
they're taken over.
IRL on the 31st of July will make some significant announcements about World Cups and an international calendar.
You said it with IR, it could have ended up a lot worse
Yes.
than ICC. Good evening to all the people who are watching, including Tony, who can't wait for the double header on Saturday. 2 cracking games at the Halliwell Jones Stadium, where Lee, as we know, cheated to beat Salford yesterday. Had 17 men on there. No, I don't think you have 17 men. Plus the referee, 2 touch judges, 2 in-goal officials. That's 17 plus 5, 22. 22 men against the brave 17 of Salford. They take on St Helens, who've got no place because they've all got head knocks now. So that's well done to Catalans for helping Lee into the final of the Challenge Cup. Get me each way money on Saturday, that'd be nice. And of course York versus St Helens in the women's semi-final, which after yesterday's game between York and Leeds should be a cracker. What's happened? What happened this week? The only thing that happened off the field, I don't think it necessarily much happened apart from the Ian Lenigan.
Ian Lenigan stood down after 16 years stewarding Wigan. Which I think it'd be very hard to say hasn't done anything other than an exceptionally good job. That they've had success on the field and rebuilt the club, particularly off the field. And I think the work that's been done to re-engage with the community, I think they would be the first to admit that there was that almost element of taken for granted that we're here, you'll come, you'll support us. Life's not like that so much anymore. I think they work very hard to open the Robin Park base. They've embraced Women's Rugby League, PDRL, LDRL, wheelchair. and they look like a very, very stable club, and that can only be to the credit of the leadership at the very top. So yes, I think he's done a sterling job. Obviously, we don't support Wigan, so we're not the people to ask, but from the outside looking in.
I don't know if his spies still listen to the programme or not. So if you're watching, Simon, pass on your best to your dad.
I did see some Wigan fans complaining about him and was sort of glad to see the back of him. But I mean, goodness me, the success that they've had under Ian Lenigan's reign, when they'd probably been starved of some success by Wigan standards prior to that, the move from Orrell to Robin Park and they're based right next to the stadium, the junior development and the way that they brought juniors through into the first team, the success they had with Michael Maguire. Yeah,
as well. I think it's been very important. The 150 and
the rebadging, which I know it wasn't universally popular at the time, but I think that's probably settled down, and some of the innovation that they've done around, the way that the players have sort of been brought through from Robin Park into the stadium, things like that, and I think quite rightly they're a club to be held up in terms of the standard that they deliver both on and off the field. I'm sure there'll be plenty of other clubs wish they had as little success as Wigan have had over the last 16
and as
years.
few juniors as they managed to bring through.
Yeah.
Pines in the press room as well.
Still standard bearers.
And I think interesting the signings that they're making for next year. I'm guessing that there is some money being pumped into the club.
Except that they're still bound by
The
everybody
salary cap.
else's restrictions, the salary cap. I think the only slightly dark cloud over the rain would be the way Robert Elston was appointed, because I think Ian Lenigan was at the forefront of that and wanted to be one of 3 clubs that paraded him on a pitch and announced him, that led to, for the sport as a whole, an expensive split which didn't actually take us anywhere. So I think that might be in the cons column rather than the pros, but other than that, I think I think he's worked tirelessly to turn the club around, and the people of Wigan no doubt will be sending him off the right way and be very grateful to the contribution. Looks like they've got a great backer coming in, which he won't be as quite high profile as Ian. He's one of these quiet billionaires.
They're the best ones, I find, yeah.
Yes. But as you say, he seems to have a lot of resource, so whilst he can only spend to a certain limit, then he'll make sure that all the other things surrounding the club are maintained or enhanced, which again is proper succession planning.
I remember you'd be hoping that with Wigan having given copious free bottles of whiskey out to people retiring from other clubs in the last few years, that they give him a big one as well.
A vat.
A vat of whiskey. Drink responsibly. But so we'll see what happens. There must be a more modern example of a couple getting back together after being divorced that's more recent than Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor in terms of Super League and the RFL.
Oh,
I can't think of one. I can't think of one. But the viewer, they will know. They will know. So that's the news. Nothing else has really happened. We've had a quiet few weeks. Apart from transfers, which agencies might be going to West. Why would you go to West? They're rubbish. John Bateman said that. He said they're rubbish.
Going home.
Yeah.
There was talk of TNT being interested in the rights.
Are they this week's The Zone? Next week's
The
Tanta.
Yep. We're just going around all of the outlets to make sure that Sky knows
Channel 5 fans,
there's a big market out there desperate for rugby league.
Screen Sport.
Again, you would hope that from the time scale that was laid out by Rodri Jones that perhaps we weren't that far away from an announcement on the television deal. We certainly need it because everything seems to be hinging on that.
They seemed to suggest mid-July, didn't they? Which we're now in mid-July, so I think it's probably going to be towards the end of July.
Yes,
it's July
before the summer holidays.
Yes, at some point in the future. Yeah. I mean, if they do get the rights to rugby league, I hope they do it a lot better than BT did anything else. Because as I said in the magazine, but there you go. Apparently, according to Matt Shaw, according to Tony, George Burgess might be going to Castleford, so that's exciting. I thought they were signing young Iro. And all them Papua New Guineans that were coming over months ago.
The danger of signing people at this stage of the season. I understand a lot of recruitment is going through, and we'll hear a lot more about it for who's renewing contracts and who isn't, and who's going to be playing at clubs for next year. The great danger of bringing somebody in now is how do they integrate into the squad? What impact do you expect a Kyle Iro, for example, who looked a talented player in the World Cup, has never played in the Super League. Doesn't know the teams, doesn't know his own teammates, doesn't know the style of play. You're going to give him 8 games to turn around the fortunes of a club? That's asking a hell of a lot. George Burgess, he's going to fly in, he's going to get over jet lag, he's going to be fit and ready to go.
But then he retire and then come back
with a hip injury. Again, I'm just sceptical of signings at this stage of the season. To me, that smacks of panic.
Perhaps, but I think Wakefield. I don't know how you pinpoint Wakefield's turnaround, albeit.
Well, it's definitely panic. It's definitely
or is it a turnaround again after this week's result? I'm not sure, but they did make some signings, didn't they?
But that was long enough for those signings to either be familiar with the club. David Defeat has come back to an environment that he knows, and Luke Gale spent a lot of time on the sidelines before he made his debut, getting to know the way that the club was run. I think you can bring people in. Will Dagger's been here for sufficiently long to make an impression now.
Well, they've only 10 games left, haven't they? I think of the season, so it's not many games. Really.
So by the time you get somebody over here, it just Josh Griffin has played at Wakefield before, so when his ban is ended, if he comes in at the end of the season and he was in really good form for Hull, you're bringing him back to an environment that he knows. I think he was saying, the family still live in Wakefield. And
I think the reverse argument though would be, if you carry on doing what you've been doing, do you not get the same result? And so you have to change something, and so by bringing a player in does that, it may not be.
Or do you get the best out of what you've got? Isn't that great?
Well, I think you have to do. I think they'd argue that you'd have to do both. But is by making 1 or 2 signings pacifying the fans? Potentially it buys you a few more weeks. I don't know.
But if you haven't got a few more weeks, I'm not sure. I just think it's putting too much pressure on whoever you're bringing in to be the Messiah, and that normally doesn't work. And it leaves you with a player then that, if you stay up, great. You've got a heavy wage bill for bringing that player in, and they're part of your squad. And what do you do with them for next year? Because you haven't really planned that signature. Or if you go down, they're there for 6, 7, 8 weeks, and then you got to get rid of them. So doesn't really. I don't know. Presumably, Andy Last feels like he has to do something, and certainly he sounded a little bit dejected in his post-match comments this week. So yes, I get he has to do something, but doing something isn't necessarily the way out of the predicament that you're in.
And that was another game that was tight at half time, 8 apiece. Then Hull run away with things in the second half. 36 points to 18. The early birds revival continues. I mean, they're still 4th bottom of the table, but there is a gap between Hull and Huddersfield of 4 points now. Well, Huddersfield are obviously making up that gap. There's 2 at the bottom, and then there's everyone else who could still somehow get into the playoff mix. But an important win for Hull, and they are looking good at the moment. This is the week where you say to coaches, you don't want a week off, but actually, probably secretly, a lot of them would actually quite like a week off. Get the bumps and bruises sorted out, worry about the challenge cup. We're not going to Wembley, so it doesn't matter, but a good chance for all the clubs who aren't involved this weekend to just have a rest and prepare for the second part of the season.
I would think that the happiest people this week would be Catalan Dragons on 2 fronts. One, their excellent victory at St Helens, and it really, looking at it from a television screen, not at the ground, felt like playoff intensity. But also that they saw the form of Chris Satay playing for Hull, who turned that game around, and you think he's going to be with us next year. No matter who's leaving, that's not going to make Catalan any worse. He is in absolutely imperious form at the moment, and the try he set up he scored and then set one up for Adam Swift from the kick-off was just like a man mountain ploughing through the Castleford defence. And so, Steve McNamara's having his 3 or 4 days off in the Pyrenees thinking, we're doing all right. Might have recruited okay for next year.
He's one of the nicest players in rugby league. I can tell you, he's a gentleman. But that performance against St Helens was impressive. It felt like a grand final, didn't it?
Yeah. I also thought that you defend your way to championships. So when the weather's nice and things are going your way and you've got your spine where you want it to be and you play some nice attacking rugby, that's great this time of year. What's going to win you the grand final at Old Trafford is the kind of defence they showed in the second half when it's raining and horrible in October. And I just thought they didn't have a weak link. Never behind. dominated the physical side of the game, speed of the ruck, which again is something that was spoken about in a couple of other games this week. Well, you adapt to what that speed is on any given. They dominated it, they dictated it, they set the tempo. Finishing was clinical, whereas St Helens actually had the chance to win the game with the last play, and a centre playing on the wing went inside rather than stayed on his touchline, and that may or may not have been the defining score. That's the difference. You don't get many opportunities, you take them. I thought they were fantastic. Tompkins was brilliant at the back as well. I know he's coming to the end of his career, and you can see that he's struggling with his knee injury, and they are nursing him through, but he was so influential at the back. I thought they were brilliant. Kieran's a great signing for Wigan for next year, because I think he looks fantastic. But the pack was just fantastic. What a strong unit. And there aren't many people that dominate the St Helens pack. And people say it was only 2 points, but they just look comfortable holding the likes of Walmsley, and it was a really impressive performance.
Yeah, well, what a turnaround, a difference of week, mates, with losing at home against Huddersfield, which no one would have really predicted. And then
5-day turnaround as well.
Well, yeah, less than a week, wasn't it? And to put that performance in, again, I think it just shows the mental attitude, wasn't it? And that rivalry that's been built up between those two teams since that grand final, a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And from a refereeing point of view, it was a massively challenging game, because it was heavily ruck dominated, and the challenge for a referee in that game is to judge when you come in with the 6-6 again and when you don't, and what you can ride with and what you can't, what you can manage. And not only that, it's not just from a defensive point of view, it's the attacking team. The attacking teams, both sides, were willing to contribute towards slow rucks by pushing forward, milking, that sort of thing, which then makes it even more of a challenge for a referee. But I thought Liam handled it well. He's refereed that fixture goodness knows how many times over the last couple of years, including that grand final. So there's no referee in that group that's probably more experienced than him than that fixture. I just thought, I know were some people talking about the referee, but the focus should have been on the game, because I appreciate the weather wasn't great. It didn't lead to open attacking quality of rugby, but there's different types of rugby, and I thought that was a really enthralling game. It was sort of NRL standard, wasn't it?
I think the other thing is, we've spoken about how we should all be embracing the idea that matches are closer, and even this round, 1 point in one game, 2 points in two games. That's exactly what we're all saying the sport needs, the potential broadcast negotiation needs. The closer the games are, the more of a focus there's going to be on the referee, because they are going to be determined to have had an influence on the game because it's been so close. Actually, we've got to get away from that. The two go together. Referees will be more in the spotlight if the game is close, because everybody is looking for the incident that turned it one way or the other. And actually, we've always been defenders as referees. I always will be. And I hate to say it, but there was some social media content today put out by a media organisation trying to find fault with the refereeing performance. And if we're going down that route, then we're missing the point. You are going to get every supporter who has just been on the wrong side of a result criticising the referee. Look at your own team first. Saints weren't quite good enough in those clinch moments. And I thought Paul Whelan's interview was great. He wanted to praise his own team for the effort that they put in. Didn't want to make an excuse of the two players that came off, who were two of their most experienced players, one at the back and one controlling the ruck. And he specifically said he thought it was a brilliant. There wasn't an area that he picked on that they were hard done by. So therefore, the fans can't go down.
Yeah, I mean, Steve McNamara was playing games in my view by
suggesting
he was speaking to the match commissioner at half time, because it's irrelevant. The match commissioner wouldn't have spoken to the referee, so no message would have got to the referee. And all that is playing to an audience, and I think having one eye on the playoffs and potentially looking towards a grand final and getting out there a message around decision making or rucks or whatever it may be. It's a nonsense really, and to put decisions on social media of particular incidents, then you have to balance it up and put on incidents of that involve players. I mean, there's a try in that Salford game that's ridiculous.
Yes.
That at least end up scoring.
Where two players can't pick up the ball.
Yeah. Not
Which
to mention,
actually is the difference on the score.
Yeah, I'm not to mention the penalty that was given away for offside, which then was marked 10 for dissent, which gives them an extra 10 metres to kick that penalty goal. So, I think, in fairness, I think Salford fans recognise that the team's not probably playing as well as it could do.
And they have a discipline issue at the moment, that they're losing the penalty count in all the games too often.
Yeah, and I think once one incident happened, so last week we talked about forward passes, and everybody seems to be talking about forward passes, even when they're not remotely forward. So, albeit, there probably was one given incorrectly in that Catalan game.
The other thing about forward passes, and again, everybody will think, you're always excusing the match officials, is that you cannot go to the screen because there isn't a definitive angle on deciding if that's a forward pass. It's where the camera is, and sometimes the impression that it gives viewing it through a screen is not what you get on the ground, and that's why you can't go and have it adjudicated. What you can't fault is the referee's positioning when he gives a forward pass. When he stood right next to the person out whose hands the ball comes out of, that's a forward pass, even if the camera angle may indicate that perhaps it wasn't.
Yeah, although it never ceased to amaze me when we were doing our own reviews that we would have to determine on the one camera angle whether a pass was forward or otherwise, and you could just debate some till the cows come home. So I think my view was that on that pass that was given in the St Helens game wasn't forward. Yes, Liam was in a good position. I just didn't think it was forward, but that's my opinion. But yeah, look, there's been some fantastic games. That
I just thought that was
just
right
had everything
there,
really.
Almost in terms of gripping you as a neutral fan.
Yeah.
Then you couldn't even go and pour yourself a drink while the game was on because it was just enthralling. And everything that we look, it's great sometimes to see 30-26 and loads of great excesses. There's nothing quite like seeing 14-12 and it going down to the last play of the game, and you're looking at the energy levels of the teams, you're looking at which sub might come on and change it, you're looking at surely they can't make that despairing tackle, and yet they do. I guess another consolation for Saints might have been, I thought Matt Whitley was outstanding for the Dragons, and it's rumoured that he's going to be playing at St Helens next year. So again, their recruitment looks good. Sione Matautia, discipline issues. Again, perhaps if you were his coach, you might be saying for all the great saving tackles that you do, you're still going too high too often. So again, you always look at home, which I think Paul Wellens is keen to do. It was everything you want from the sport.
St Helens the favourites to win the grand final with the bookmaking people. With the Catalans
to win the
second,
Challenge Cup as well.
Indeed.
Even though we all know now that Lee are going through.
We're going to win the Challenge Cup. Great news, by the way, for Max Jarrett. Of course, he got a £250 fine for Grade B striking against Huddersfield. Insert your own striking joke here. But he also won the club lottery the other week and won £250 on that. So it's kind of balanced itself out. So
in
well
one
done to
account,
Max. Yeah, well, and he could have won some free fish and chips or something, but he won the £250. So well done to Max on that one. I've not seen Huddersfield Wakefield, and well done Huddersfield on winning the game. So sounds like Wakefield were rubbish according to Mark Applegarth.
I think he said they started poorly and never recovered. I think they scored very early, Huddersfield, didn't they? And they're in that again confidence, this elusive characteristic that everybody talks about. They're going nowhere 3-4 weeks ago. They get slightly improved at Wigan, but they still lose relatively heavily. They pull off arguably one of the results of the season to go to Catalans and win there, and then they come back and take that form into their next match. So I suspect of all the teams that probably don't want to week off this week, it will be Huddersfield.
Yeah, and consistency is the word that's always banded towards referees, isn't it? But it applies equally as much to teams, because that's the nature of the competition this year, really, that teams are consistently inconsistent.
Is consistency allowed? Because does that involve momentum, or is that a different?
No, that's back to the forward pass.
Well, I'm going to say, do people still think that Steve-O rule exists, don't they? You throw someone off a train and it goes, whatever it was, I can't remember. Kevin says it was a big win for the Catalans against Saints, both on the pitch and mentally too, as they top the table 2 points clear of the Leopards. Adam says the ruck seems increasingly difficult to referee. Isn't it a problem that loose carries and interference are treated as mutually exclusive when both can occur at the same time? Question mark.
There was a number of decisions in that game, wasn't there, around how the ball came out in the tackle, and you have to appreciate that a referee is usually at least 10 metres away, because he's on the 10 metre line, at an angle which probably makes him at least 12 metres away, and may not have the clearest view of how the ball comes out. He may be assisted, which people don't appreciate, by a touch judge on the side who has a better view. But if the touch judge doesn't have a view and the referee doesn't have a view, but yet the ball's on the ground, he has to make a decision. He can't wave play on, as somebody was asking on social media. Albeit Nigel Wood did suggest that at one occasion that perhaps they should just give them the ball back like they're doing under eights.
But then he also suggested having a point of who was winning at half time.
Well, there'll be loads of draws at the minute. There's loads of these half-time draws, which I know people are cottoning on to.
Would you have to have golden point before you went in for half time to get the point at half time?
It's a bit complicated, this. It's far too complicated.
But no, I think again, isn't it something about sometimes the speed the ball comes out? That there's normally an indication that maybe there is a hand in if it shoots out as opposed to just drops out. You have to. There's no hard and fast rule. So if you can't see a ball steal, it doesn't necessarily mean you just rule as a knock on. You have to look at the indicators. If the ball's come shooting out and it's well after the initial contact, the chances are it's probably a ball steal. And you have to make, whether you like it or not, an educated guess one way or the other, because it's simply not play on. You hope that you have a good view of the ball, or the touch judge has a good view of the ball, and between the two of you, you can make that decision. I don't know whether that's a situation whereby you might end up with a captain's challenge next year. I can't remember the circumstances in which you can challenge in the NRL. But presumably you've got to have a bunker and or video at every game.
Yeah.
You can't just have it in televised games.
No, and well, it's assuming that all games would have a video referee next year, but it just depends on the number of cameras that you get. There may be a camera angle that demonstrates that it's wrong, but I don't know whether they'll go to a captain's challenge on non-TV games with a limited number of cameras.
I don't know how you get a definitive answer on that, unless you just said there is no definitive answer.
And
therefore you keep your challenge.
And even with the benefit of replay, sometimes it's still difficult to determine whether that ball was stolen because there was a hand on the ball, because defenders are going to wrap the ball up. They have to remove their hand at some point because the tackle's being made and they have to clear. So whose responsible is it? The ball carrier has a responsibility to have a firm grip, and equally the defender shouldn't pull on the ball. I mean, I remember a Challenge Cup final decision in 2017 when I was video referee, Wigan Hull, and that was massively controversial, and I ruled that to be a loose carry and not ball steal. It divided our group in review, and I know the NRL had a slightly different view to what we did in Super League, and look, sometimes you just can't come up with a yes or no answer on it, and you have to make an educated guess based on the indicators.
Kevin says Wakefield play Warrington in 2 weeks. 2 points for you there, mate. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. I think sometimes it's pretty clear that the referee on the pitch has got it wrong, so why can't the video referee get in your ear and say that you got that wrong?
You'd be there forever doing stuff like that. If
referees make lots of mistakes.
Why have a referee at all then? Just let AI
exactly.
do your refereeing.
I'm not suggesting that they make lots of mistakes, but every time that you think, oh, hang on a minute, I need to have another look at that, and that's what went wrong when going back to that first Magic weekend, where the video referee in live play decided that the referee and touch judge had got it wrong, came in breaching sort of protocol and suggested that it was a different outcome. And we all know what that outcome was. It was wrong, and so you'd have to be really careful to go down that road. And then the game just ends up more and more stop-start, which is why at least Captain's Challenge you have a limited number of challenges, so it reduces the stoppage.
Tony says there's a big debate on Twitter. There's always a big debate on Twitter, but this week it's about who's the best 13, Cam Smith or John Asiata. Both fantastic stats again this week. Leo Leeds, who's the best number 13?
They play. Yeah, but are you comparing like with like? They play slightly differently. Let's wait till we have to make some dream teams.
Play one at 13 and stick the other one in the second round. Do that.
They're both having great seasons.
Carsten is here, bumping up the numbers from Switzerland.
We've gone up to number 12.
What about Hull KR signing more Germans than Bayern Munich? Yeah, it's this Schneider fella.
Apparently is eligible to play for Germany.
And gets a drop goal. Apparently Leeds can't do drop goals.
Try and assist and a drop goal.
I was at work yesterday and my studio was invaded by someone who was at the game on Friday, who shall remain nameless, but they told me that didn't even bother going for a drop goal. What's going on?
They didn't set one up. Well, I think the
Because I mean, the main man was off, but so I'm told.
I think the plaudits go to Hull KR, who in the set that they scored the winning drop goal did absolutely everything right. They knew they were going for that drop goal long before they put somebody there to try and kick it over. And George King must take a huge amount of credit, because in the 5 tackles before, he took 2 of the drives, dead straight, almost was looking round saying, "Are you ready yet?" And that's how you win Golden Point. That was brilliant. The first time they did it, just shaved under the bar. The second time it just went over the bar. But I think enormous defensive credit again to Hull KR, who in the second half were restricted to the fact that I think Leeds scored the only 6 points in the second half, but Hull KR would not buckle, and it was their resilience come Golden Point. They kicked off. Leeds twice dropped the ball in their own 20 metre line, and first time didn't quite work. Second time was executed perfectly. Give as much credit to Hull KR. Leeds had an opportunity in the last set that they were attacking in normal time, where they put up a bomb. Louis Senior dropped it, so they were restarting on the 10 metre line. They had 6 tackles. The fact that they didn't set up for a drop goal. In fact, they were almost relatively unfortunate that Mikolaj Alecki's run was too good, and he got held up over the line. You then get moved back 10 metres, so like you're setting up for where you think you're going to take the drop goal from, and actually you've got to move backwards and start again. It was almost too. But now the fact that they didn't attempt one is it's to their discredit. But I think focus on Hull KR, and that's how you do it. That's how you set up, and that's why they deserve to win. They were. That puts them again in a great space for a Challenge Cup semi-final. Going back to that venue, having had a poor run of form, having again, I suppose it defeats the object about bringing somebody in late in the season. But
you beat your own argument there, haven't you?
Yeah, I've just found somebody who.
Is that because
he's come a couple of weeks earlier, and it might be that couple of weeks.
We talked about it last week, didn't we? About how you did about bringing a player in and the effect that might have, and getting them in the week early, preparing for the semi-final, and it couldn't have worked out any better, could it? In their wildest dreams, really, probably didn't expect that.
But it's also about having the players back who can do a job, and James Batchelor was fantastic. He's just re-signed a new extended contract today. You can see why. So if you get those kind of influential players back, and you can bring somebody in who. So the interesting thing about Schneider is he's I think 22, so they're not getting a greenhorn. They're not taking somebody out of the Canberra system who's literally only been there 2 minutes and been in their Jersey Flegg team. They're bringing in a guy who has been in and around some very experienced players, and he's coming here at an age where you would think he would have the personality to force himself on this team. It looked like he did. He tired a little bit in the second half when they were just defending all the time. But when they needed him at the beginning and when they needed him at the end, he was there.
As Kevin points out, which is annoying because I was going to say this, George King, very underrated. Probably one of the most underrated players in Super League. Immensely.
And again, just signed a new contract, 27, which for a prop he's just almost at the perfect age. But no, he is, again, there are some flamboyant players in that whole KR team, and I thought Tom Opperchick and Sean Kenny-Dowell were fantastic. But you just sometimes need that grunt up front, and King has been fantastic this year for him.
Where the Leeds fall on the having a week off thing, are they happy with the week off then?
As Rowan Smith said, they don't have any choice. They would like to be playing this week, but they can regroup. I think all the players have been given a few days off, which probably won't do them any harm with the 8 to 9 games left. Their next match is away at St Helens, so they're going to have to be good. They've won there already this year, so and Saints will be coming off a draining semi-final, you would imagine, with either the elation of getting to Wembley or the desperation of not getting there.
But Saints can't afford to have a week off, can they?
No.
I know they're only 4th now on the table. They've climbed the table,
and they've got another fixture to fit in that will make an Easter for them towards the end of the season. So they're going to have to use their resources quite carefully. I don't know. I think the thing about Leeds this year is that 4 of their games have been Golden Point games. Like normally get one a season. Yeah. I just think, or well, maybe not all gone to Golden Point. I've been 1 point games. The Huddersfield game didn't go to Golden Point, but 3 of them have. It's like that. What does that say about the season? It's fantastic.
We mentioned Lee and Salford in passing. 5 defeats in a row for the Red Devils, which is a concern. Again, not to take anything away from Lee. And tell you what, if what I've learnt this week, if you put a video up saying, "Oh, we think Lee are great," lots of people watch it from Lee. so just we just need to find club. We need to say something positive about Lee. David Bowman, I think got great taste in suits. And put that up as a clip, and we'll get loads of views. Not that we're chasing viewing figures, but 5 defeats in a row for Salford, and as Paul Rowley has said before, they've got no troops, they've got no players, they can't bring anyone in, or seemingly anyone new to bring in, so they are running with the hand they've got, and unfortunately their discipline isn't going well at the moment. They've lost another game at home. I mean, they've got a loyal band of supporters, we know that because they threw in the money, 7,000 there yesterday. I don't know how many came from Lee, but obviously plenty at home as well. But they're still on the verge of the playoffs. Their season is not over yet.
That was always going to be the danger when they had such a small squad, and they know that because they've run with small squads before, haven't they? So that's what probably Lee's being lucky. We talked about that last week, didn't we? But there is a little bit of luck involved, and we talked again about preparation and not playing. The way that you train, the way that you practice, etc. But when you have a small squad, then that's one of the drawbacks, and you don't really have a system in place behind that to back it up. I don't know whether there's the opportunity to bring players in on loan at this stage of the season, but it comes back to finances, doesn't it?
I think the concern would be that the players you'd want to bring in on loan would either be the ones that can't get into Super League teams that are probably behind you in the table anyway, or that you can't really go to the Championship because most of their players are probably involved in either a playoff place or relegation. So again, I think the market's as tight at the moment as it's going to be in the entire season. The worry I would think for Salford was that having got 22-10 ahead, they couldn't hold on to that lead, which again is to the credit of Lee that they don't give in and they play in the right part of the field, and they've got their strike players like Lam who can play off the back of Asiata, and Hardacre apparently had a really good game. You experienced people when you're behind are worth their weight in gold. And Lee found a way to win that game. And whilst that's the credit to Lee, if you were Salford, you'd be thinking, how did we give that away? And it wasn't down to some refereeing decision.
They're making quite a number of errors as Salford as well, and I think from
the frustration, I think, is spilling over then to their discipline.
Agreed. I think that's evident when you see some of the clips that they look frustrated and they get frustrated by external factors, and then that doesn't help their performance. I would suggest, and they've had discipline issues particularly around the ruck for the last couple of years, and dare I say it, they might benefit from some expert advice on officiating. But
is there a consultant they could call?
Possibly, but the bigger things that they can focus on, and that's things within their own control, which is their own completion rate and their own discipline. And it doesn't take a genius to work out that, look, the referee's made a decision, he's not going to change his mind, so there's no point contesting it. Don't concede another 10 metres.
Yeah, I think the other thing is you play in the right part of the field, and then if you do make a mistake or you do give away a penalty, you're not immediately under pressure on your own line. So having the ability to have players in the team that can kick the way Mark Sneed does, but then know that the chase has got to make that valuable, and there's a lot of pressure on their top line players at the moment to play whether they're fit or not. I mean, I'd say that the week before, Sneed didn't look fit. He came off and he had his leg heavily strapped, and you wonder, did he have enough recovery time to go out there and play again the following week? And if he's not actually at the peak of fitness, but everything rests on him to tell you, Brodie Croft the same. I don't know because I didn't see them yesterday, but he was coming back from injury the week before, and whilst he was influential, not for the full 80 minutes, which you're not when you're either coming back from injury or you're playing needled up. And it looks to me like, because the numbers are so thin, that there are some people out there playing who perhaps could benefit from a rest, but they just can't. So I suspect that that's more at the back of why Salford's form has tailed off at the moment. Of all the teams that probably are benefiting from a week off this week, it would be them. I think Warrington have got the same issue at the moment as well, in that they're going into a lead in games, but they can't keep it. That to me is the mentality right?
Yeah, I always felt that was a strange game. I thought that Wigan Warrington game. I always felt that Wigan were going to win the game. I don't know why. It just felt like Wigan were going to win. They just don't seem convincing at the moment, do they, Warrington? I know they played well against St Helens last week, and I was trying to reassure Warrington fans, probably with little success. There's glimpses there. They're just not able to put an 80-minute performance in, are they, at the moment?
No. And it isn't just about when George Williams comes back, that'll solve everything. It'll give them more options on attack, which clearly they're not scoring enough points. But it's almost like there's a collective disbelief rather than confidence that if the opposition come back, we're not going to be able to handle it. I would have thought that game against Wigan at this stage with a week off would have been one of those games where we need to make a point. Wigan might have the semi-final bit on their man, which they clearly didn't, to their credit. But we need to redress that cup tie, where we had an extra man for 73 minutes and we couldn't make it pay. And they get to the point early in the game where they're just starting to dominate a little bit and they still can't make it pay. And you go, that seems to me a psychological thing rather than a selection thing or a tactical thing or a... they've got most of the players out there.
Yeah, you can't just wait for one player to return and then hope everything's going to be solved. And I don't know how long George Williams is still.
Well, they were hoping he would be back this week.
Yeah. So
but then he was at Wimbledon. So.
With the extra week off, then he might be fit, ready for the
big game against Wigan. Wigan didn't even get on second gear, says Kevin, as they won 26-12, and all those things. Liam Fowler's now the. I'm trying to think of a way of describing him. I don't want to say he's the most overrated, underrated player because he's not, but he's one of those players who everyone says he's underrated, but probably isn't underrated because everyone rates him.
He's just consistent. He is consistent, and he just puts in a solid, good performance sort of week in, week out, and that's why he's probably taken for granted to some extent. It's probably not flashy.
I think his ability to follow the ball is outstanding. The number of tries he gets from backing up when you think he shouldn't be there. If it was Bevan French backing up, or if it was Jai Field backing up, or Harry Smith, you would understand it. But it's always Liam Farrell is always an option. That is, great grounding, but fantastic match awareness. He's always had that, to be in the right place at the right time. I think we can debate whether he's underrated or overrated. He's 7 or 8 out of 10 every week, and every coach would have him as one of the first names on the team sheet.
Yeah, I didn't mean he was overrated. Just everyone says he's underrated, but because we say he's underrated all the time, he's very good, and he could be key in that game on Sunday against Hull KR, which will come to the semi-finals. I think
the interesting thing about these two semi-finals is we weren't really sure who was going to win them when the draw was made, but obviously that's a month before these games are played. Now we're getting to the week of the games. I still have no idea who's going to win either.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, because where Hull KR were going, you weren't necessarily expecting them to put in a performance, but I think certainly last week will have helped them. I'm not suggesting they will win, but still don't think there's a guarantee. There's no guarantee outcomes in either of those two games.
I don't want to say it's bad news for Lee and Hull KR fans, but Scully's tipped you. So
I'm just getting the odds.
Wigan Saints again, everybody. Oh no. Hull KR, they went to Headingley in 2015 and beat Warrington in that semi-final when they weren't planning to do so, and we know what Lee have been like this season. Anything can happen live on the BBC, and there's no Andrew Castle.
The interesting thing is there's pressure on the St Helens and Wigan's team because they are the bookies' favourites, and that will play perfectly into the hands of two coaches who will love to be the underdogs. And how great that in a season where we've had uncertainty of outcome, that is showing it on the league table, we're going to get that in the Challenge Cup semi-finals. They deserve to be great attendances. They deserve to have great viewing figures because we genuinely don't have outstanding favourites, I don't think, in either game.
Hull KR are taking hundreds of thousands of people because they always do away, so that's the good news. So Wigan, you better get some tickets sold, otherwise it's going to be all Robins at Headingley on Sunday. I was reading an article about the courage of Wimbledon this week, which was in the Telegraph So
what were you doing reading the top?
Well, it was a link online, wasn't it? So
Oh.
I just clicked on it. And usually you can't read them because they want you to pay, but somehow I managed to read the whole article and the comments. And someone compared John Keir to Andrew Castle. If I was John Keir, I'd be suing. I'd be straight on. None of this Jeremy Vine nonsense, taking a donation for charity. Straight onto the people getting them sued. That's no, you can't. No. And of course, I'm sure John Keir will be all over the telly this week because he's won the Challenge Cup twice. He's got to be on the TV.
3 if you included assistant coach at Wigan.
There you go then. 3. Must have been part of some Castleford team. Well, around the club. He might have been the Alliance coach in '86 by that point. I don't know.
Probably doing the scoreboard.
Yeah, I've got to look in his book downstairs and I'll tell you about that. Before I go on to the Championship, what else happened this week? Well, Leeds Rhinos, they're in a Challenge Cup final again. They're on course to win a 4th straight Wheelchair Challenge Cup, Phil, I read. So, no problems for the Dragons there in any motivation. What a great final it was last year in Hull. 48-34, thanks to Stephen Ibbotson for writing that in the paper because I couldn't remember. And it's Sunday the 20th of August at the English Institute for Sport in Sheffield. So if you fancy going, go. Well, tickets aren't on sale yet, but get one. And that should be an absolute belter.
Well, it's 2 teams again who really have antipathy between them. There's some great friendships between the teams in that, for example, Seb Bashara, he's playing against a lot of his England teammates. Jeremy Vorson and some of the other French lads will have been on the in the World Cup final. But there is genuine dislike between these 2 teams. There is some real feeling before, during and after the matches that they've had against each other. The cup final last year, the Dragons came into Hull as if they'd already won the cup. That really annoyed Leeds. There was an air of arrogance about them. I think there were some things said on the court which I don't think can be repeated off it between the 2 sets of players. That wound them up a little bit. And I think there was a clip on Saturday on Twitter that John Seeger did, interviewing Tom Halliwell and Seb Bashar about the prospects of the final. And you could almost sense that whilst they were great friends when they were in England camp, they wanted to prove that they were better than each other. The Dragons, I don't think, have been beaten for about 6 or 7 years in the French competition. And they came over last year thinking that they would walk through the Challenge Cup, got to the final, but couldn't win it. And I think that defeat has stung them. So,
But what happened a few months later?
I wonder whether the game going to be on TV?
BBC.
BBC sort of red button, is it?
We don't know if it's
Online
BBC Two or
Yeah.
Red
No,
Button.
that'll be good. It'll be
It's
interesting
a
to
shame.
see what they. I don't know what the crowd is, what they can take it. EIS.
1,500, I think.
Yeah.
If depending on which of the
You'd like to think that
halls
would
it's
sell
on.
out, particularly after
Well,
the back of the World Cup last year.
The other thing, though, sadly, is that the Rhinos' first team, men, are playing at the same time. Which, again, it's difficult because the men are playing on Sky. It's a Sunday game.
Yeah.
And the wheelchair team will be playing on the BBC. So, again, as a governing body, you can't really alter your primary broadcasters' schedules. But it is a shame that quite a few Leeds fans I know who would have gone to the EIS won't be able to.
Tongue in cheek, but the French assistant referee from the World Cup wheelchair final, he was obviously banned from international wheelchair. He could make an appearance. I'm sure he would.
Getting to present the
Can
cup.
you imagine if the Dragons insisted that they had an official? It was agreed and he turned up.
There was an official, by the way, that Catalan Dragons, the men's team, banned from their ground, just because they thought he was biased against their own team. He was a French official, so they banned him from the ground. That's what you're dealing with.
It'd be brilliant.
The French. They can't listen to them. We're not in the charts in French. In France. French France. The shame about Saturday was, of course, it was a festival, an inclusivity festival
It was
in
fantastic.
Hull, with
Fantastic.
loads and loads of games.
600 people there. LDRL, PDRL and wheelchair.
Gravesend and Sheffield winning their, or finishing at the top of the groups in the Challenge Trophy. So they will play before the final of the wheelchair final on the 20th of August. But that wasn't on. It wasn't on our league. It wasn't on anywhere. And I wish I knew what our... Do we have a digital strategy? There's a very IMG bowl kind of phrase to use. I know 4020 TV's digital strategy, stick a load of content in. See what happens.
Is that
Put Lee
strategy?
on. That's the strategy. Put Lee on there. It's got 800 views. We'll put them more about Lee
Is
on.
that the throw enough mud and someone will stick?
PNG,
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Papua New
anything on
Guinea,
PNG, lots of people
Tonga.
watch it.
You know, I'm going to open a box of programs on a video next week because it's just content. I mean, it'd be boring, but I'm going to do it. But they did have the Northwest men's and the Yorkshire men's cup finals on there, which are so important that in the League Express, if 4020 is the magazine of record of rugby league, isn't it? So this is the newspaper record because it's the only one. It takes up this much space, right, to talk about these games that were on our league. And no disrespect to Ince Rosebridge A versus Stato Heath Crusaders A in the Alliance Cup final, but why is that being streamed? And the Wheelchair Challenge Cup, we just come off the World Cup, where everyone's saying, "Oh, Wheelchair Rugby League, it's great. This is the best thing ever." Women's Rugby League, "Oh, it's great, wonderful." York Leeds on Sunday, 12-all draw. We could have predicted it would be a great game because they are the two of the three best things in the competition. It's nowhere. What's the strategy? No disrespect to any of these teams
Well,
involved in these finals, but who's bothered?
Doesn't make any sense is that if you know the Wheelchair Challenge Cup final is going to be on the BBC, you want to see the context of the two teams that are in that final. And if you can just set up your 2 or 3 cameras in one venue to get 6 hours of live sport, and they're 10-minute games, you know, the results were pinging through on social media. It was really trying to work out, which team has won all their games or lost all their games, or what does it mean now that Hull are playing Warrington, who's still involved in it? Like, put it on the telly.
Well, been great to
For
watch.
me,
The
that's-
10-minute games.
That's what our league is for, in my opinion. No, they're showing the 1895
Just going to say that.
semi-final. The problem with that is that if you're at the men's and women's double headers, you're not going to pay to watch the R League coverage because you'll be at another game. You're almost encouraging people to sit at home and watch on the telly.
I was just going to say the 1895s presumably they're paid to watch on our league as opposed to what would have been free with the wheelchair content.
Which is where I think this question is accurate as what is the strategy, because no 2 weeks seem to be the same. If you're going to charge, fine. If you're not going to charge, fine. If you're going to put out prime content like a Challenge Cup tournament, or are you going to put community finals when, again, you know, when there's nobody there other than the fans of the teams that are playing, and the interest roughly would be around only the teams that were playing, you're limiting your audience. Whereas you put your wheelchair and you've got, 8 teams, 9 teams, you know,
Whole day's worth of stuff. Especially when people decide that they loved it in the World Cup. Well, it's a chance to see some club games. And we've seen, you know, the sportsman showing, which we know he's Betfred in disguise, showing, is it 1 or 2 of the Magic rounds they've shown so far?
and they're doing the 3rd.
So,
but again, that's where the strategy doesn't make sense, because if you're going to show the Magic rounds, and you're going to show the Challenge Cup final, why wouldn't you show the Challenge Cup tournament? It's almost as if there's a piece of your jigsaw missing there. And presumably that will roll into at least 1, maybe 3 internationals at the end of the season, which you would think would either be on Sky or the BBC. You need to know who these people are that are playing.
We've not just come off the back of the World Cup. We've come off last weekend, where at Wimbledon, 3 of the people involved in winning the World Cup were in the Royal Box, introduced to the crowd and the worldwide television audience and social media audience, and
were cheered to the rafters as much as Billie Jean King and Gary Lineker.
You mean members of Stato Heath Crusaders 18 weren't in the Royal Box at Wimbledon?
Well,
maybe next year.
Maybe Brad Pitt won't be there for the final next year. They can have one of the tickets there. It's no disrespect intended to the players of these amateur teams or community teams or whatever we're supposed to call them. These sounds like a very old person thing to say.
I suspect the answer will be about resourcing and money,
I'm
which is what it always comes back to. But I think you make a valid point about.
They were also played at 2 venues, so
they
you've
had
got to
2
set up
lots
the
of
cameras at the north or the northwest. You've got to set up the cameras for the Yorkshire. You could have had 1 set of cameras in Hull. And played that inclusivity card, because you wouldn't have to have seen the PDRL and LDRL games, but you would have had those people that you could have interviewed, or, you know, it was the sport being its inclusive best, and we didn't see it, which is a shame.
It's easy for me to sit here and criticise, though, because
I don't think it's criticism. I think it's just a question.
So I also wonder whether there's an opportunity for the RFL to do work with. There's many universities and colleges with students that require
100%.
lots of experience. It's an industry that's very competitive to get into, and the more experience that you get and demonstrate, the better.
And if you don't charge, you know, if you do have to have a director there, clearly. You do have to have a floor manager there. But if you're not paying for it, you're receiving it for free, you can have rookie commentators. And the one thing we know about rugby league as well is that there are summarisers on hand. Tom Coyd will come out of coaching London Roosters to be your summariser if that game is on. James Simpson, when Leeds aren't playing, will go and stand next to a commentator and tell them what's actually happening. So it just seems really strange to me that wasn't on. And as you say, nor was a women's game. That some weeks we have women's games, some weeks we don't. This is one where, again, you're leading into a semi-final. Both of these games are going to be on an outlet on the BBC. Two of the teams are playing each other. But this may end up being the Challenge Cup final dress rehearsal. But we didn't see it.
I think it might do. Wigan 20, Warrington 12 is in the Women's Super League. Barrow 24, Featherstone 10, Lee 46, Bradford 10, Salford 22, Castleford 10, York 12, Leeds 12. Drama-filled match, it sounds like.
3 tries to 2.
Sin binnings and everything have broken the fence. Sin binnings.
Yeah.
Two Leeds players ending up in the sin bin.
Yeah.
Dirty Leeds. Dirty Leeds. So that will be...
But just start to hit a bit of form when it really matters.
Interesting semi-finals. York versus St Helens on the Saturday.
Absolute cracker.
That one kicks off at 11:45 in the morning. And on Sunday at 2:15, much more respectable hour, Wigan versus Leeds, a repeat of the 2018 Grand Final, which we were at.
And are the women's games on BBC as well?
I think
The Leeds is on the iPlayer.
Right.
And I think
It's on the
Red Bull.
Something
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
So they're on the BBC platform.
And on the 1895 Cup, he says, going to the other page.
Saturday night,
London Halifax. London off their victory at Swinton.
At Rosslyn Park.
And Halifax beating Newcastle, that was it, on Sunday, 50 points to 12. And on Sunday, you've got York versus Batley. York, who a few weeks ago you're thinking, well, is Andrew Henderson in a bit of trouble? You don't say it publicly because you might speak to him. But they win 3 games in a row. No, Hendo in. They beat Sheffield Eagles, who...
In the Hendo
Andrew Henderson Derby, too many of these. Henderson relishes victory over Sheffield. But there they are.
Was that the headline?
That it should have been.
Yeah.
Sheffield, I'm not saying bother, they're fourth in the table, but and Batley, of course, we know all about Batley, and they had a spirited performance away in France, and they're losing 34-12, again 12-all draw at half time.
So the question is, where was Craig Lingard?
Maybe from both places at once.
Batley were playing in Toulouse on Saturday afternoon at the same time as Castleford were playing in Hull.
I mean, I don't want to say anything offensive about Hull, but where would you rather be, Hull or Toulouse?
I would have been in Toulouse.
I mean, I haven't got a passport, so I would have to say Hull. But...
2 intriguing semi-finals there, the 1895, I think, because London have improved from early on in the year. Halifax are in a bit of a dip. Appreciate they got a big win against Newcastle, but Newcastle bottom of the table. So I think that's an intriguing game, particularly because it's at London at home, and York with their upsurge against Batley, with who are certainly you would expect eyeing a place at Wembley.
I just think the great thing, and we've probably said it before, is that whoever gets through, there's some brilliant stories. If London were to get back to Wembley, there is a huge amount of goodwill and marketing that you would think they would want to do on the back of that. If Halifax get there, they'll probably take the biggest support of those 4 teams. If York get there, it's all part of this progressive, resurgent York. And if Batley get there, they've never been to Wembley before. So whatever the narrative is, it's a great story. And actually, I think for the neutrals, they all play a brand of rugby that we can get behind, whoever gets there.
I think any combination of those
works for me.
Works, doesn't it? Yeah.
I'd like Batley to get there purely because I think, clearly I'd like Craig to sign off with taking the team to Wembley because he's a friend of the magazine, but also, I think a team that won the Challenge Cup when it was first instituted in 1897, but have never been to Wembley, that would be his perfect sign-off. So, but I do like what they're doing at York.
So while the magazine remains neutral, obviously Craig Lingard, Lou McCarthy Scarsbrook, and
Martin Kelly.
Yeah.
So I don't think Swinton.
No, but in the women's final, well, Danica doesn't count. She'll be there anyway, won't she? Because she's at the Omnivan envelope these days.
Especially if there's a buffet. Tasting buffet.
Got to make the most of it. What else happened in the Championship? Featherstone beat Barrow, 20 points to 7.
Closer than most thought, I think.
Another half-time draw there. Winners beating Keighley, 38-22.
Keighley resurgent.
And Bradford beating Whitehaven. Whitehaven winning at half-time, but the Bulls running away with things in the second half.
Whitehaven got bigger fish to fry at the moment.
I think they've lost 3 players, haven't they? Or they've decided not to play because they're not getting paid.
Yeah, and they, to go to crowdfunding to try and keep the club going. We wish them all the best, but that's pretty desperate.
Real honesty from John T. Golding coming out and saying that on BBC Cumbria as well. I mean, plenty of times we've had clubs in similar positions who, without sugarcoating things, lie about the situations they're in, but Whitehaven have come out and say exactly what's going on. So, yeah.
Again, Keighley stepping dangerously down towards that relegation zone.
Yeah, they conceded 38 points. They've conceded quite a few points over the last few weeks. I'm sure that's Matt Foster's first priority, isn't it?
Strange appointment, though. Again, you're bringing somebody in who's been in Queensland for 10 years, and just because he happens to have been a great player when he played.
He's been coaching over there,
Yeah,
hasn't
but he doesn't know. He won't know the players, as in he might have been sent some videos of who they are, but he's not worked with.
He won't, but I think you're right. He can soon do his homework on it. He's got an assistant coach that can do the homework on it, and coaching is coaching, isn't it? I think I don't know who the right choice would have been, by the way. So
no.
But I didn't even know they were in the market to appoint a head coach. Actually, I assumed that they were running with Jaimel to the end of the year, but obviously not. But I don't know who they play next. But he doesn't have long to turn it round, does it? There's 8 games left in the Championship. The saving grace for Keighley might actually, as sad as it sounds, might be Whitehaven's demise potentially.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't wish that on Whitehaven.
It's that strange thing where you don't know how players are going to react in a situation where they're not getting paid. They may just go all out. You just can't predict a situation like that, can you? It's a strange one. Just thinking on Saturday, you've got a very full day of rugby league, because I think the NRLW starts at 10 to 4 in the morning. I'm not going to be up at 10 to 4.
And that's
I'm honest.
Frank Goldthorpe, isn't it?
Yeah,
first game.
So I'm not going to be up at 10 to 4. I promise you, I won't be.
No, you haven't gone to bed by 10.
Well, no, the Cats might won't be up by that point. But I think there's a couple of NRLW games which will lead into the 11:45 kick-off for York and Saints.
The three NRLW.
That is the NRLW players speaking to the media. The NRL players speaking. That's still rumbling on, isn't it? That's never going to end, is it?
It is.
Have they announced their end of season international made-up tournament yet?
Well, if it's on the verge of being announced at this Singapore board meeting of not the ICC, it's just that thought of Raffles Club made me think of cricket and stripy blazers. That's all going to have to be announced. I wouldn't be surprised if we got another Pacific nation touring over here in 2024. An Ashes series after the next World Cup, and possibly an announcement as to where the next 2 World Cups might be. And all of that.
We can't plan that far ahead. It's rugby league.
I think that's.
We can plan and then just chuck it away again.
Yeah.
I think there is a Pacific tournament for the end of this year, which will be replicated next year, but the Tonga will go back into it, and the team that's coming here will come out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it will work. And then they'll stop that, and there'll be an Ashes tour or whatever. And
so if I know it's not
but
going to be
it
Australia,
is all actually there, and I think the CBA may well be announced around the same time, because they won't be able to hold those fixtures to ransom if they've been announced. So.
Sorry out for Landis. I don't know. Don't even know if there's anything to do.
Does he watch?
I don't know. Some people in Australia must watch.
It's a sorry state of affairs, though. That's what's going on down under with the RLPA, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've not followed all the ins and outs. I'm not going to pretend to know. But
well, I know they're not asking for more money, are they necessarily? It's
terms and conditions, isn't it? And insurance
and also who pays for these international games. With the NRL saying it comes out of the money that goes to the players, and the players saying, but 90% of us don't play an international game. It needs to come out of the television contract for international games. But of course, the international games are part of the existing television contract. So there's arguments on both sides, but they just need to get round the damn table.
I've not watched this, but Rugby League Raw did a good comparison, says SB, between Asiata and Smith last week and showed how they're both much better than Morgan Knowles. So there you go, it's official. So they stay on the pitch longer. I don't know. In League One this week, Cornwall made it 2 wins in a row. Congratulations to Cornwall. They beat the Hurricanes 28-8.
I think that's a big win for Cornwall because the Hurricanes have been in good form recently and been showing signs of, being perhaps the team that might emerge from those development ones with the best prospects in the future. That's a decent win for Cornwall.
Not team of the week, though. No.
Really?
No, it's Catalans. Quote of the week, not quote of the week, tweet of the week, Mark Wilson. What's going on there? TV commentator Mark Wilson. I remember when he was just a podcaster.
Yeah.
He's at the darts now. See, Michael Smith was at the Saints game. They got him on the telly to plug the darts. They come watch the darts. And then he won yesterday, so that was good.
Then the TV switched to him at some crucial stage in the game, and I was shouting at the TV, "Why have you put a camera on him?"
But it's not as bad.
Leave
as
the camera on the action.
It's not as bad as Wimbledon though, which was just utterly dreadful for shots of anyone vaguely famous in the crowd. And some people just thought, "Who are these people who just look like knobs in suits?" Not Prince of Wales. I knew who he was, and his son. I'm bored of. Oh look, his son does funny things. He's just a kid. We need the Ashes back, says Kevin. It's easy. The biggest game out there, but the Aussies don't respect us, so they're not interested. Kevin's like Scully's.
When was the last Ashes series?
2003.
I mean, it's a generation ago, isn't it?
We're still Great Britain, though.
It's insane.
But I think it will feature. I don't think there has to be a financial incentive to come, and we also have to take responsibility for the fact that we haven't beaten them for 50 years in a series. We've won the odd game. So what is their incentive to keep coming over? We have to be better.
So there was never, I'm thinking about it, there's never been an Ashes series during my time officiating at professional level.
There have been Tri-Nations and
Tri-Nations, Four Nations, I was involved in those, but it's mad,
World
isn't it?
Cups.
And I remember as a young lad going to watch the Ashes tours, so I think if they do get it back, they will sell out like there's no tomorrow.
Well,
they need a big stadium for that.
We're not going to go to Lee and Doncaster.
I also think the other thing is
Warrington.
hindsight being a wonderful thing, and I wouldn't criticise much about the World Cup, but not playing Australia turns out to be a mistake, I think, because like your last final, 2017 is England-Australia. You really probably should have started the tournament in Newcastle with England playing Australia. They're in the same group. Then you're into.
You're forgetting that the tournament was skewed to get England to the final.
Absolutely, and they
didn't go to script
against Australia, and they just failed to do that.
They get England Australia in a wheelchair game, which did have a bit of a build.
But the thing is, with the cricket at the moment, and every other England Australia battle. I don't know if they're due to play each other in the Women's World Cup or whatever.
Maybe the netball one.
Bring them over, and it has resonance. You can build that up outside of who might be the favourites and who wouldn't be.
Has Eddie Jones signed half the NRL yet? It's coming soon. Saturday, watch all the rugby, all of it. Probably 2 games at once. Get all your screens full of rugby. Also in League One, Hunslet beat Oldham. That's what we were talking about. Hunslet beat Oldham 21-8. So they shall again. They might.
Played a couple of games more than the teams around them, but they can do no other than keep winning.
And Doncaster, who brought in cashless food next year, they're third. They didn't play this week though. North Wales 24, Workington 32. As Workington build up that gap ahead of North Wales in the playoff spots. This week in League One, it's Cornwall versus Workington, Dewsbury versus North Wales. Dewsbury don't seem to have played for about 3 months. Doncaster versus Midlands, and Rochdale versus London Scholars in a big game at the bottom end of the table, but not really because London are 4 points adrift and have still scored more points than Wakefield. So I know this has become a thing now. Lee, of course, are still the reigning.
How can they have scored more points than Wakefield but played 6 games less?
Is it less or fewer? Is it less or fewer? I don't know. Yes, I mean there it is. Saturday, the big game. Lee and St Helens is the World Club lineal decider again. So Saints could win it back and make everything pointless so far this season. Have we spoken about everything that's happened and going to happen? I don't think there's anything else.
Some French referees came over. I don't think that's much of a story, but they did. But
Yeah,
I do
they've
think that's good. And, you know,
They had the other fella came over in the luggage.
well,
here.
it's great that we're sharing.
No, it's a great
expertise.
initiative. Yeah, it was a great initiative, and they have done that on a smaller scale before. But I believe it's part of a sort of almost an exchange. There'll be a similar situation when the sort of French domestic competition's up and running, and English officials will go to France and officiate, which will be a baptism.
Yeah.
And seen some of those Elite One
Yes,
games.
yeah.
So it'll be a great experience for the French officials having come over here and officiated here and got some feedback and trained with the full-time referees, and hopefully for those English officials that travel to France, they'll gain a lot of experience from that.
Big statue being unveiled
on
on Wednesday in Cardiff, the Code Breaker statue, which is fantastic because acknowledgement in a physical form that Rugby League wasn't the pariah that it was painted out to be, and I think that'll be quite emotional. I think Billy Boston's hoping to be down there, one of the people who's having his statue unveiled. Shame, of course, that Bev Risman passed away. His funeral's tomorrow, and his dad will be unveiled as one of them. So, yeah, that'll be hopefully gets a lot of coverage because that's quite significant that Cardiff will have a statue to Rugby League.
We need to hide it from the Welsh Rugby Union because they're skinned having to play a game against the Barbarians to make a bit of money this autumn, I read.
What
so
do you think
they might knock it down and
smelt it down? Yeah.
So I'm a bit concerned about that. So, and also, happy birthday to Phil's favourite player this week on Friday, Daniel Anderson of the Leeds Rhinos. Shouldn't print their ages. It's rude to.
To be honest, I wouldn't do anything she didn't want to do.
And on that bombshell. She's Wakefield, so she might be at Wembley representing my wonderful city. No one else will be.
So who are you going for then? I know we don't do.
Well, all of them.
Yeah.
Right, let's work.
But let's make ourselves hostages to fortune.
Right. So how many championship games have we seen this season? That have Via played 0. Right. So Halifax, Batley. There you go. Old West Yorkshire. So it gives Radio Leeds an excuse to go in case Leeds don't beat Wigan. Well, they beat Wigan. Contact them.
I'm going back to London.
Yeah, I think London with the home advantage will probably win, and I'd probably back Batley, but I think that.
Boy from Dewsbury backs Batley, shock.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
I know.
Yeah, no. From your point of view, I'd quite like to see Batley there, because of them never having played at Wembley. But both could equally go either way, to be honest. But I think I'd go with London and Batley.
Leeds should beat Wigan because they did the other week in the women's semi-finals. Who do we upset? Because like York always upset York.
I think York will beat St Helens.
Yeah. Scratch handicap with the bookmakers, which is interesting.
York Leeds.
Yeah. Narrative, isn't it?
At least there'll be some Yorkshire presence at Wembley after a disastrous season for the White Rose teams.
And in these.
The men's semi-finals, St Helens. I don't think the Keys could go anywhere. And by the way, I'll just put a caveat into all this. As somebody that's retired from refereeing, as with any retired player, in the first 12 months of retirement, you're not allowed to bet.
No.
So there's no bets being placed here, by the way. But I think, given St Helens' dominance, you'd have to back St Helens.
That's a couple of big misses though,
Without Rugby,
I mean, if they get Makinson back, maybe then.
Yeah, but honestly, it would not surprise me if Lee win.
No,
it would not surprise me. Either game could go either way, and I think again Wigan, you'd probably.
I don't know.
With their experience.
Having seen Hull KR this Friday, in adversity, I wouldn't rule them out.
Right.
I can't call either of them.
Because they've got Germans now. We can't go right off the Germans. Can't go off St Helens.
I can't call either of them. I honestly can't.
It's interesting because, as I've said earlier on, I think you go back 2 or 3 weeks with Hull KR, and I think you certainly would have probably backed Wigan, but
I think
are they getting players back?
I
that
would
performance
like
last week?
either Lee or Hull KR to win, because I think there's a better story at Wembley. There's greatest respect to Wigan being the holders, Saints being the most dominant team, the Saints Wigan derby. Everybody will say the only authentic derby. but we've seen that game.
We've seen it countless times. We've seen the.
And I really wouldn't mind a Lee or a Hull KR being in that final.
Or Lee against Hull KR.
That would be the ideal one because, as we saw with Hull KR in 2015,
they'll go in numbers.
Cass a couple of times.
Yeah.
You might freeze on the bigger game.
I don't know whether they can both pull it off. I suspect one of them can, but I don't know which one.
I've only mentioned gambling because I need to get up the charts in Australia and they love it, don't they?
So I think of the two, I would suggest Lee would have a greater chance. But I don't know. That's saying a lot, isn't it? To potentially write off St Helens. Honestly, I think they're two great semi-finals. They are. I'll certainly try to be watching them if we're not otherwise engaged. I should be watching them.
It's always bound to try and hit John Wilkin on the head with a ball. Either Saints or Leeds.
Oh, don't be enticing violence.
I'm not from the crowd, from the players. From the player, not the crowd. No. Kevin says, what happened to the World Cup happening in France? I'm guessing that's going to be sorted, as you said, the next two World Cups. Why is it in Singapore? Because it's near Australia.
Halfway between.
I always thought it's more.
Slightly. But if they're in the Raffles Club, then it's...
I've got an A-level in geography.
Yeah, it's like 13 hours to Singapore and 7 to Sydney, isn't it? From Singapore, so
I think you can have a suit made while you wait as well.
I've been as far as.
Is that where Nigel got his suits from in Singapore?
I'll just. It's exactly where he got his suits.
Ralph suits.
Yeah.
Who should present the Challenge Cup this year?
Royalty. Right. Kate loves rugby league now after the
Kate,
World
yeah.
Cup.
Was she at the tennis? Kate.
It's a long. Well, I'm suggesting it's a long time. Is it a long time since we had royalty present the cup?
I don't think you can call Brian Barwick royalty.
Prince Harry. Does he not count anymore?
Have we not had like?
Would we have to fly him back? Because I don't think we can afford to.
No, but I mean, he was at the final a couple of years ago. Remember, he was there. He stood next to Ralph. Everyone took the mickey on Twitter.
Did we not have Prince Edward at some point? I don't know.
Well, that's okay as long as he's not the other one. We're going.
Oh,
well, he'd have sweaty palms. The cup would slip out of his hand.
Royal going cheap.
Yeah.
I was watching a documentary.
Desperate to give something away.
I was watching a documentary about It's a Royal Knockout the other day, which is, well, we can't talk about that for other reasons. But so royalty and or Carol Vorderman, if you could present it. Everyone likes Carol Vorderman, apart from some people. Who else have we got?
It's generally been rugby league royalty, hasn't it, over the last few years? I believe. Was it Ellery Hanley last year? Have I made that one up? No.
Well, you were there.
Who presented you your medal?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Honestly, can't remember. I think we did it. Was it on the pitch at Tottenham? It must have been because there was no steps to walk up.
No, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I think it might have been Ellery Hanley last year. Yeah.
Well, if you can't remember, I mean, I wasn't there. Phil was there. But he was writing something. So, any suggestions? Put them. Send them to the RFL.
Sensible or otherwise.
Courtesy of whoever runs the RFL these days. Manchester, England. Enjoy the weekend. It should be some great action. And hopefully we've got some great action to talk about next Monday here